you. My name is Amy Small. I'm a GP and I have long COVID. I caught COVID at work in April 2020. I was working during a pandemic in a healthcare setting. I was doing my duty. I was fulfilling my vocation. I caught COVID at work, passed it on to my family, and both my husband and I now suffer from long COVID. We went from fit and healthy 39-year-olds working full-time. We were running several times a week, looking after our very young children, to being shells of ourselves. Our health robbed from us. We went from fit and healthy individuals who did our daily exercise, painted rainbows on our windows and clapped on Thursdays, to individuals who had to summon every last drop of energy to go and put Disney Plus on to entertain our children so we could get back to bed. Everything we took for granted, the ability to sleep, eat, think and breathe, changed for us. We did not seek help in the early days. We stayed at home like we were told to. We could not get help to look after our children, so we had to carry on and cobble together the little energy and resource we had to get through every day. After a month of fever, I was seen at the hospital. I was told there were others like me, but no one knew what to do with us. They would phone me in 3 months to see how I was getting on. My husband and I struggled, trying and burst to cook, clean, homeschool our children, but ultimately pushing through, as we always had, which of course made us worse. I tried to go back to work after 3 months. Half a day of seeing patients left me bedbound for over a week. My jaw was too sore to chew even cereal. I could hardly lift my arm to drink. One day I was too fatigued to speak. This from the person who burnt the candle at both ends for 15 years as a doctor. This from the person who had stayed up nights on end with young children. This from the person who could never stop talking. I took to Twitter and Facebook to seek advice from others with long COVID and chronic disease. I bought books on pacing. I spent hundreds of pounds on acupuncture, osteopathy, nutrition advice, supplements, and psychological support. I was lucky I had the means to do this. Many don't. After 6 months of illness, as a consequence of being unable to fulfill my partnership duties at work, I was expelled from my practice. My partners are worried I would be disabled for life with ME or chronic fatigue syndrome. We were about to head from a household of 2 incomes to half of my husband's, as he too had been unable to work for 6 months. Around this time, I discovered that quite simple medication would be a huge turning point for me in this illness. If I had seen someone early on in my journey who knew about long COVID, the potential sequelae and how to manage it, I would never have lost my job. I never would have had to been in the position to call upon a charity to help me find out how I was going to pay the bill should I remain unwell. I never would have had to leave the job and community that I loved and worked so hard for 10 years. If I had had access to coordinated long COVID service with access to appropriate advice, support and medication, I would have recovered more quickly. I would have been able to be present in my children's lives, not only having to rely on cobbled together childcare, frequently putting upon others to take them out. I would not have had the immense stress of having to rehab myself back to work in an unfamiliar setting. I would have not lost the income that I did at that point. I would have not had the psychological distress as having my life as I knew it being torn apart. If I had access to coordinated long COVID service, I would have seen a doctor who understood what long COVID was. The doctor would have had access to the tests I needed. The doctor would have been able to reassure me that my cognitive problems were temporary. I would have been able to see an occupational therapist for pacing advice. I would have seen a physio for physical rehab. I could have seen a psychologist for mental health support. I am lucky I'm feeling better. I am lucky that in my work, I will always have a job if I'm well enough to do it. I'm lucky that I have the financial stability to allow for periods of ill health. I'm lucky I have the knowledge and expertise to advocate for myself. Many others are not as lucky as I am. Many others won't be able to return to their jobs. Maybe if medicine could have intervened earlier for them. Many others won't have access to therapy and not have the support and encouragement to know that life will get better. If I lived 60 miles southeast of here, I would have had access to all of these things. Why is my health any less worthy than that of a person living in England? As a GP, I've struggled to get children with long COVID seen. It took me 3 attempts at referrals for one child for anyone to believe me or her that she had long COVID. For my adult patients, I'm having to refer to lots of different services. None are coordinated, none speak to each other, and each rule out issues and pass them back to me. This happens to all patients with chronic disease. If we can get this right for long COVID, we can get this right for so many. Chest Heart Stroke Scotland offers vital advice to support to patients in how to self-manage their condition, but they cannot diagnose medical problems and they cannot organise investigations. GPs do not yet have the expertise to manage this condition in the community. They don't have the experience yet to manage, advise and prescribe for these patients. We need a dedicated long COVID service for patients with an embedded clinician and we need it now. I ask those of you with the power not only to listen to us today, but act upon our requests. We already have 1 million cases of long COVID in the UK. The country is opening up, COVID cases rising 2,000 to 3,000 per day in Scotland, which is effectively 200 to 300 new people being afflicted with long COVID every single day. We've had announcements for funding and research and funding for self-management, which is all progress. But what about the NHS staff and the GPs who are trying to do their best for their patients without the proper resources? We need action now. Thank you.